Okay, let's first give you the number that you've been looking for. The number, as I said, the India Today Mood of the Nation poll brought to you by Yashwant Deshmukh's C Voter. And this is what it says. Projected seat share. If elections were held today, the NDA we are projecting would get in January 2092 296. That's down from 353 Lok Sabha, but still substantially higher than the opposition, because the UPA goes only till 127 and others are 120. So what the big picture is, if Lok Sabha elections held today, the NDA remains the dominant force at the moment. Others have climbed up from 97 to 120 in the last 2 years, and the Congress or the UPA has climbed down from 93 to 127. But there is still a substantial gap. So the disjunction between state national elections becoming clearer. We also take a look at now seat-wise. The BJP is exactly at the halfway mark on its own. 271 as per the India Today Mood of the Nation done by C Voter. The Congress is 62, marginal improvement. The TMC is 35, rock solid on that number which it had last time. AAP is 4, others are 171. In fact, the TMC rising compared to the 2019 elections. So that's the picture that we have. The first big numbers. Joining us now, Yashwant Deshmukh of C Voter, who's done the poll. Rahul Verma, fellow at the Center for Policy Research and Cephologist. Raj Chengappa, the editorial director of India Today, is with us. And also joining us, Shehzad Poonawalla of the BJP, Supriya Srinath of the Congress, and Dr. Shashi Panja of the Trinamool Congress. Let's get you, Yashwant Deshmukh. It's your number, your polls. Explain this to us. In the first part today, we saw state governments facing a measure of anti-incumbency, but it appears that if a general election was held, the NDA does better. Is that the pattern at the moment, that state elections, governments vulnerable, including BJP governments, but when it's a national election, the NDA has the edge?
Well, Rajdeep, the survey very clearly indicates the vulnerabilities of the BJP and NDA in the very expected spots. The survey very clearly says that TMC is likely to sweep if the elections are held today for the Lok Sabha in the West Bengal, state of West Bengal. The opposition alliance is likely to sweep Maharashtra, bringing the BJP numbers, NDA numbers down by a big number. The opposition is likely to make a comeback. Opposition, when I say opposition, means Congress, likely to make a very strong comeback even in the state of Karnataka, where BJP swept last time, one-way traffic. Having said that, Congress is also making a very good revival in Haryana. In that also the survey points out. Having said that, all this, even after all this, largely what I can tell you that the NDA numbers, the drop in NDA numbers from 2019 have to be largely attributed to the coalition partners going away from the NDA. Shiv Sena going away from the NDA and joining the UPA rank and file. Akali Dal going away from the NDA and still not joining the opposition rank and file, but still not being part of the NDA anymore. So, barring these major exodus because these two major alliance partners, I don't see much of a damage as far as the national NDA vote share or the BJP vote share is concerned. In fact, Rajdeep, in Uttar Pradesh, the best possible combination that could have happened in 2019 was SP and the BSP. And if I may say so, if the SP-BSP combination could have continued in assembly election, it would have been a very difficult election for the BJP. But now that they are going in their own different ways, UP has become actually, for the Lok Sabha election, much easier for the BJP.
Right.
In assembly, they are still finding it, some competition for Akhilesh because he has taken one pole position as far as the opposition leadership is concerned. But Akhilesh numbers in different trackers and different surveys, even then his individual numbers are ranging in the 30 to 35% category when you compare it to the positive potential combined vote share with Mayawati of 45%. That is not happening.
Right.
So all in all, NDA is sitting pretty at this point of time.
Rahul Kanwal will give us the breakdown in a moment, but Raj Chengappa, your first reaction. What it appears from what Yashwant Deshmukh says, if Lok Sabha polls held today, the BJP suffers or the NDA suffers damage in Maharashtra. They've lost an ally in Shiv Sena, the second largest state, Maharashtra, with 48 seats. Suffers in Karnataka, which they had swept last time. Takes a bit of a hit in Haryana, which they had swept last time. But despite that, seems to be holding its own clearly, because in the Hindi heartland, by and large, the BJP still remains the dominant force. So it almost seems that 2.5 years, and we are at the midway point, in a way, of this term of Mr. Modi, the NDA is still way ahead of its rivals, even though it's declined from 350 plus to below 300.
Rajdeep, I would look at the results in a sort of a mixed bag for both BJP and the NDA. The good news for them is that they have stopped hemorrhaging. If you saw a poll in August 2021, for the first time, the BJP numbers fell below the majority mark, went down to 269. Okay, and the NDA also dropped significantly. I think it lost about 50 seats. What the good news for them is that, and this seems largely because of the performance during the second wave. The good news is that they've weathered that storm, and they seem to have held their own and not continued to hemorrhage downwards. So that's the one side of the
because in
story.
August, the poll was held in the backdrop of the second wave, and clearly the NDA and the BJP was taking a hit.
A very bad hit, right? They had dropped significantly, and for the first time, they were not getting a majority. In this also, they are yet to hit the majority. They are just halfway through. They're there, but they seem to have that stability and the fact that they've recovered and not gone down further. So that's the first part. And given the fact that you had three major crises confront the government, whether it is COVID, the economic fallout of COVID, and the Chinese intrusion. These were difficult things for any government to handle, and many tall leaders would have been felled by these things. But the fact that they held is good news for them. I think the bad news, if there is a bad news or maybe a news for concern, is that there is still a lot of caveats being put into this. They are not shooting up. There has been an economic recovery, which the people acknowledge and say, yes, in the last 2 quarters you've done well, so we're not dropping you. And there seems to be some favor in terms of handling of COVID. Clearly, it's a positive because compared to the second wave. But there are large concerns that they should have, if this number stops at this level, it's a great worry for them. I think just one more point I'll make, Rajdeep, is that I think the opposition should look back and say, how come we have not dropped them far below? And that is a failing of the opposition.
That's a major point to take to you, Rahul Verma, because we saw even in the August mood of the nation that there was a feel-bad factor, particularly in the backdrop of COVID 2.0. The economy was hurting. Despite that, the NDA 4 months later seems to have stabilized, and the opposition has not been able to fully capitalize on this seeming feel-bad factor that exists on the ground, whether it's with the economy or whether it's with COVID. Are you surprised?
Not really. The discussion so far, basically what it is suggesting, that in most of the states where BJP managed to make inroads in 2014, 2019, they are holding it. And they're basically holding it in north and west of India, in the heartland and western parts. Now, in most of these states, basically beginning from Haryana to, to Maharashtra, to Karnataka and MP, Chhattisgarh, the principal opposition is Congress. Except UP and Bihar, where state-level parties come up, their principal competition is Congress, and it somehow seems that Congress is still not being able to challenge BJP's performance, BJP's narrative on the ground, be its failure in sort of like controlling the price rise, managing the economy, or COVID. So I think that's the first thing which is happening. So BJP's losses are coming from just Maharashtra, Haryana, and perhaps West Bengal, where last time they had
and some
18
Karnataka.
seats. Some from Karnataka. Second, I think what is sort of like challenging for BJP, that they are also not being able to break new grounds, meaning they're not making further inroads in Bengal, Odisha, Andhra, Telangana, or Tamil Nadu, or Kerala, right? So basically, the coast of Bay of Bengal still remains far away from BJP's reaches. I think those two are, and so things to look forward is basically within. within the next 2 years, whether BJP can make up for the losses in these states and get new ground.
Let's get quick political reactions to those first big numbers. Supriya Srinath, you from the Congress first, then Shehzad Poonawalla can respond. Supriya Srinath, clearly at the moment, if elections were held today, Narendra Modi would be returning as Prime Minister as per our numbers.
So let's not talk about whether elections were held today or not. Let's actually discuss for a moment the 5 elections, that the states that are going into elections, and BJP is not going to win even one of those, and that's the reality on the ground. I see reality from very different from what you're projecting here, with all due respect to the survey and all due respect to the respondents. What has changed since August 2021 and now? Unemployment has gone up, prices, inflation has gone up, poverty, 4.8 crore people pushed into abject poverty. 27 rupees average income of the farmer, 170 continues to be the minimum wage. The disparity between the rich and the poor has only widened. So who's happy and who are your respondents? I'm actually a little amused by what you're saying.
Why are they saying, why are they still voting? Why, when they're asked the question in our poll, as per the poll, they are saying we would still vote in many of these states with the BJP?
I have done many opinion polls as far as the state of Uttar Pradesh, for instance, is concerned, where I come from. And the BJP was in a very comfortable position and they were going to come back. Look at the desertion that's happening in their camp. You think these people don't understand politics? It's because the BJP is facing abject removal from the state of Uttar Pradesh, or for that matter, the other 4 states that are going into elections. And that is precisely the case which will happen with Mr. Modi too. I don't understand that Mr. Modi's popularity fell from 66% to 24% in August 2021. What has revived it?
Okay, very quickly before
poverty has
very
gone
quickly
up,
you made the point before Rahul Kanwal takes over with the number. Just a minute, Shehzad Poonawalla, you want to give a quick first reaction. What it suggests is, in the first half of our program today, we saw that in state governments there is a measure of anger against state leaderships. 4 of the 5 ruled by the BJP, but when it comes to national elections, you seem to hold your own, except in some states like Maharashtra and Karnataka. Maharashtra, where you've lost an ally like the Shiv Sena. Your first reaction?
Rajdeep, this is an endorsement for what I call the 4 V. V for Vikas, V for Vyavastha, V for Virasat, and V for welfare. This is the combination that every government of Bharatiya Janata Party, particularly led by Narendra Modi ji at the center, delivers on. Let me just give you some examples. Let's go for Vikas. Today, in the name of Vikas, you can see the collections of GST for the last 6 months have been more than 1 lakh crore. The December collection was actually more than the pre-pandemic period. My dear friend Supriya ji talks about unemployment. Maybe she would like to see 27% is the unemployment rate in Rajasthan as per CMIE data. And the same CMIE data has said that we created 85 lakh new jobs just in the month of September. And also, I would like to inform her that as far as the economic growth is concerned, we have now almost reached the pre-pandemic levels of growth. We are going to be the fastest growing economy in the next time to come.
We are also talking before you came on the show in the first part, in every state that we polled, the unemployment situation is seen as serious, and a majority of the people said their economic situation has declined since 24. No, just a minute, Supriya. He did not interrupt with you, Supriya. In every state, they are seeing their income levels having gone down, unemployment being a serious concern. So let's not minimize that.
No. Look, Rajdeep, I am not minimizing it, but I am saying that there are 2 aspects on which people vote. 1, the problem, and 2, who will be the solution for the problem. The Congress is not looked as a solution for resolving any of these countries' problems. Let me give you an example. When it comes to Garibi, इनके तो 4 generations Garibi हटाओ का नारा लगाते रहे. But today, connecting the poorest of the poor with Jan Dhan, connecting them with toilets, connecting them with Ujjwala Yojana, connecting them with Saubhagya, connecting them with the basic Ayushman Bharat, this has been delivered on the ground. The Nal Se Jal Yojana, these yojanas are transforming lives in the way that Supriya Srinath, and she's a privileged person. I'm very happy for her. She comes from a privileged background. Her father was an MP. She will never understand these things. For her, poverty is an experience or a state of mind that you have to experience after going and having lunch with somebody. But this is not how it works. In Rajasthan, for instance, the farmers are on the streets. The Bajra farmers, the farmers in Hanumangarh were beaten up, and today you have farmers losing their lands because Rahul Gandhi did not fulfill their promise.
Very quickly, Supriya Srinath, because we want to move on with our numbers. This is not a regular
election where
political.
36,000
Just a minute now,
crore of
Shehzad.
loans was
Shehzad,
wiped
you
off
made your
from the
point.
farmers.
You
We
made
gave a
your
Ganga
point.
Bhugtan of 1,51,000
You made your
crores.
point, Rahul
We
Kanwal.
gave
Why don't you
Kisan
take
Samman
over?
Nidhi to
You made your
lakhs
point.
and
Let's
crores
get
of
in more
farmers
numbers.
just in Uttar
No, I
Pradesh.
have a point to make. No. Please give me a chance to speak. I think it's my right
Okay,
to
okay.
BJP will not even stop at bringing my dead father to this. So thank you very much. Yes, I'm indeed very proud of him and I'm very proud for the rights that he stood for. Thank you for bringing him in. But just to put it in perspective,
No, Shehzad,
CMI data का आप बात कर रहे हैं. Please keep quiet. Please keep quiet.
Family of Prime Minister every now and then.
Please keep quiet.
Madam,
Please
please,
keep
I'm being
quiet.
respectful to you.
CMI data की आप बात कर
Rajdeep
रहे
and Rahul, look, I am very
CMI
respectful.
data
No,
की आप बात कर रहे हैं.
Shehzad, let her finish. Let her finish. Let's not make any personal. This is not a debate. This is not a debate, regular debate. We are giving everyone equal chance. Very quickly, Supriya, whatever point you
Yes.
want to make.
Yes.
The BJP is quoting the CMI data. Mr. Khattar says he will go against the CMI to court. He will sue the CMI. Mr. Yogi is going to show their figures. This is the BJP. You want to talk about economic growth pre-pandemic level. Mr. Shehzad Poonawalla, we contracted by 24%. We are barely above the ground. Our real rate of growth will be less than 1% for this year. What are you talking about? First, understand economics, understand the numbers, and then come and spew.
Let's go back.
The reality is, it will take us 3 years to go to the pre-pandemic levels.
No.
And it is thanks to them
No,
that our
you can't
economy
respond.
went down from
Rahul Kanwal
8.2%
has
growth
more
to
numbers.
4.
Okay, let's go back to the numbers. Rahul, give us the sense of how these numbers are breaking down, because it's clear at the moment, as per our numbers, the NDA is well ahead of the UPA and others. But give us a sense of why this is happening.
So the overall picture is that the NDA would form a government if elections are held today. But the moment you go into a state-by-state breakup, there are some very interesting themes that emerge. Themes of losses for the BJP in states like Karnataka and consolidation in certain pockets. So let's run you through how the big states are projected to fare if elections were held to the Lok Sabha at this moment. And I'll start with Rajasthan, where the NDA is expected to bag 24 seats, the Congress only one. In the Lok Sabha elections, the BJP had 25, so it comes down by one, but essentially the BJP holding on in Rajasthan. From there, let's come to Gujarat, which will become very crucial because you have a big assembly election coming up later in the year. In Gujarat, the BJP expected to bag 25 out of the 26 seats. The Congress gets only one. So at least as far as the Lok Sabha is concerned, the BJP strong in its bastion of Gujarat. From there, let's come to Maharashtra, where there is a big upset in the works. And part of this is the fact that you've got the Shiv Sena, the Congress, and the NCP fighting as an alliance. And if that were to continue till 2024, it is a massive headache for Messrs. Fadnavis, Shah and Modi, because the Mood of the Nation opinion poll projects that the UPA combined could get 32 seats, the NDA only 16. So BJP tally crashing, the UPA at 32. If you look at what happened in Maharashtra in the previous elections, you had 16 for the BJP, but that's because at that time the scenario was different from what we're seeing right now. So there's a big loss for the BJP in the works in Maharashtra, where when they fought with the Shiv Sena, they did far better than if these three parties get together and fight as one alliance. From Maharashtra, let's now come to the next state. Give me a moment as I call up the data of Karnataka. Here again, the BJP likely to fall to 17, the Congress at 10, and the others at 1. Remember, the BJP had 26 seats in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections in Karnataka. So coming down to 17 would be a blow. 10 seats projected for the Congress, where in 2019 they had only 2. So a big advantage to the Congress in Karnataka, and a big loss for the BJP in the southern state of Karnataka. And that gives a lot to think about, because you've got an assembly election coming up later, and it suggests that things aren't looking so rosy for the BJP at this moment in Karnataka. From there, let's come to Tamil Nadu, where the UPA, that's largely the DMK, they have the Congress and some regional allies with them, likely to bag 39 seats. This again is Earlier they had 38, so that's one more, but this is in keeping with what happened in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, where MK Stalin led the DMK and by default the UPA to a very strong performance in Tamil Nadu. From Tamil Nadu, let's go across to Bihar, where there was a tough, tricky assembly election. But if the Lok Sabha elections were to be held right now, the NDA expected to get 30, the UPA 10. And here, Yashwant is assuming that the RJD and the Congress will fight together, which is not the case at this moment, and he can explain that, but 0 for the others in Bihar. Let's come to Madhya Pradesh, where 26 leads for the BJP in Madhya Pradesh. They had 28 in the last Lok Sabha election, so that's 2 down, but largely doing well in Madhya Pradesh. The Congress had 1, that's expected to go up to 3, so minor gains in Madhya Pradesh for the Congress. From there, let's come to Andhra Pradesh. Now, if you've seen how with Amit Shah himself, Mr. Nadda, G. Kishan Reddy, they're trying to make an effort in Telangana and in Andhra Pradesh. In Andhra Pradesh, it doesn't seem to be coming to any fruition because the NDA isn't expected to bag any seats in Andhra Pradesh. Neither is the Congress. The large majority of the seats going to Jagan Reddy still, and Yashwant can give us the breakup. And lastly, I come to West Bengal, where the Trinamool is expected to bag 35 seats. The BJP would have hoped that since this is a Lok Sabha election, that they would do better, but that doesn't come out because in the Lok Sabha elections in 2019, the BJP picked up 18 seats. That tally now expected to crash to 7. Mamata Banerjee had lost a lot of ground in the Lok Sabha elections. She's expected to go up from 22 to 35. So do you want to explain that? The big loss in Karnataka for the BJP and the fact that the BJP would want and they still will deny your numbers, Yashwant, because they'd imagine that from 18 they'll be able to increase it in 2024, whereas your current numbers seem to suggest they're crashing to half of what they got in the last Lok Sabha elections, which is totally different from the BJP's own calculation.
Sure. Should I proceed on this, Rahul?
Yashwant, tell us Bengal, because then we can go to Dr. Panja also from the Trinamool Congress on that.
Yashwant.
Yeah, sure. So it's Bengal is all the way 50% plus vote share for Trinamool Congress, and there is actually no other party in contest as such because it is a directly bipolar contest between the BJP and Trinamool, and it's almost like 16-point lead for Trinamool Congress, and which is going to give almost one-way traffic to Trinamool Congress as on today, if the elections are held. BJP is likely to poll roughly about 34% at this point of time, which is about 4 or 5 points less than what they polled in the assembly election. That is a kind of a reversal, I would say, because generally BJP tends to poll more than their assembly election vote share as far as the Lok Sabha elections are concerned. But not in this case, probably because many BJP supporters were left high and dry. We know the political situation the way they are, and Mamata Banerjee, if she tries to convince the Bengali mindset that okay, I am now the prime ministerial candidate, then that identity is also going to play its own thing.
Very interesting, because it seems that the honeymoon effect from a big victory in May of 2021 remains in January of 2022 for Mamata Banerjee, but the Trinamool is not expanding as per our poll beyond Bengal. It's still seen very much as a Bengal party. Dr. Panja, so there's good and bad news for you. You all are doing very well in Bengal if there was even a Lok Sabha poll today, but you're not expanding anywhere else. Perhaps because, as we are finding even in Goa in these assembly elections, you're still identified as a Bengal party. Is that going to be a challenge for you in the next 2 years? There's so much of talk that Trinamool Congress wants to go national. How will you go national?
No, I think we've gained a lot of ground because when we expanded to Tripura, in just about barely 3 months, and there was an election in Tripura, a very recent election, and we became the principal opposition party out there with almost 25% of the votes, just barely 3 months of campaigning there. And similarly, even in Goa, just about 3 months into Goa, and I think we are doing very well. We have our own calculations too. We've also come out with our list of candidates, and shortly again with the second list. We are, Mamata Banerjee also has visited out there, and there's a very positive response.
So you will go national. So you will continue to go national. So the Trinamool Congress will continue to go national. But the interesting part is that Rahul Verma, there is others also. If you look at our poll, there's a large number of other smaller parties like the Trinamool Congress who are not part of the UPA. And there's so much of talk of a grand alliance. Given these numbers, do you think there will be even more pressure on political parties? You need a grand alliance. If you have to take on a juggernaut like the BJP, you're going to have to settle your personal divisions and work together.
Yes, but it's difficult to forge grand alliances, especially when survival is not at stake or there is a larger political will which drives those grand alliances. So grand alliances are easy to talk, but hard to implement on the ground. And even if, say, some of these opposition parties decided to join hands, I'm not sure how they are going to add to each other's kitty. What will Trinamool Congress add to Congress party in Madhya Pradesh? Or will think about this. See, there is a game. So right now the game is not only to challenge or defeat BJP. The game among India's political parties, Trinamool, Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress is also up to basically who's going to be the challenger to the BJP. So they're also going to basically fight for a space for the second position. Aam Aadmi Party wants to expand itself in Uttarakhand, in Goa, same Trinamool Congress. Who are they going to challenge? Not just BJP. They are also going to take away the votes from Congress. So I think this is basically what I will call as cheap talk. But there's an
interesting data point which is coming about Maharashtra. One of the most interesting changes that our mood of the nation is showing is Maharashtra. 43 out of 48 seats went to the NDA when the Shiv Sena BJP were together in 2019 Lok Sabha. Now we are projecting that they are coming down to 16 and the MVA is the dominant alliance, the NCP Congress Shiv Sena alliance. So maybe there's a story there. Shehzad Poonawalla, you're from Maharashtra. Does that trouble you? The one troubling news for the BJP is that where the opposition comes together, like in Maharashtra, the BJP becomes vulnerable. That's where the arithmetic starts hurting you. Is that something that should worry you as the BJP goes ahead?
Rajdeep, Maharashtra is as much your state as mine, and let me tell you, arithmetic se politics nahi hoti. Politics is all about chemistry. And Rajdeep, let me tell you, arithmetically, BSP and SP was perhaps the strongest political arithmetic alliance that could have ever been forged in the last 50 years, in my opinion. But what did it result on the ground? Because just by convenient political arithmetic, you can't have social coalition on the ground. Let me give you an example. Just recently, the Panchayat election, the Nagar Panchayat election has taken place in Maharashtra. BJP has emerged as the single largest party, bagging over 400 parshads. So this is the reality on the ground. And let me tell you what we are doing. We are not sitting idle. Look, these people are people with wanting position, with ambition, but without any vision. They are only on television. And therefore, party with a mission, that means BJP. And what is our mission? The mission is to create a new vital vote bank, which is above 50%, and it's not based on religion, caste, etc. like they are moving. We are trying to create a new vote bank of beneficiaries. The Jal Sena Yojana, the Ujwala Yojana, the Shauchalaya Yojana, the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Yojanas that transform lives is going to create a vote bank of above 50%. Okay, you're saying you're trying to create a
vote bank of beneficiaries or Labharthis. Let's look at that. We asked performance of NDA. The performance of NDA satisfied in our mood of the nation in 2021 was 53%. It's now up to 59%. Unsatisfied was 17% in MOTN August to 2021. It is up to 26. But what is generally seen is, as Raj was saying, that the slide has been arrested. August 2021 saw a slide. Performance of Prime Minister Modi. In our mood of the nation in August, good was 54%. It's up to 63%. Average was 30%. It's halved to 15%. Poor was 16%. It's up to 21%. So by and large, there has been an arrest of the decline. There was a sharp decline in the Prime Minister's popularity and that of the NDA in August of 2021. It's now crept up slightly, and that might explain the chemistry of this election, Raj Chengappa, that you've been referring to, that while the arithmetic in some states is going against the BJP, Bengal and Maharashtra good examples, the chemistry by and large still remains with the Prime Minister, and therefore the NDA benefits.
You know, the results do show that the though the respondents, I can't say voters, the respondents of this survey do believe that the Prime Minister still remains the best bet for the country. And the reasons are, midway through Dr. Manmohan Singh's second term, his popularity had wilted considerably. But when you look at Mr. Modi, through these three, a triad of crises that struck the country, if you're able to hold popularity levels that not only he has stopped the hemorrhaging that happened, that it went down to 54%, but improved to 62%, is highly creditable. So there is a larger message that is coming, that in terms of alternatives, Mr. Modi is still seen as the best person to do this, the best bet.
In fact, let's look at the numbers. Best suited to be next PM is a direct question posed. In MOTN 2021, January 2021, it was 38%. It went down to 24% in August 2021. That was the lowest that Prime Minister Modi's popularity had gone in terms of being asked a direct question. Best suited to be PM was only 24% in the aftermath of COVID 2.0. It's now back to 53%. Very significant. In fact, in January 2022, Mr. Modi preferred by 53%, Rahul Gandhi by 7%, Yogi Adityanath 6%, Amit Shah by 4%. So that really seems to be the critical point where the Modi factor works. Yes, very quickly,
no,
Raj.
I just want to finish the point that I was making. You're right. If you look at the gap now between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi, the gap is phenomenal, 46%, whereas in 2021, August 2021, it was just 14%. So clearly, Mr. Modi has demonstrated that he has the capability to weather the crisis. But we always, therefore, if you see the cover headline of our magazine, which says, "In Modi we trust," and then we have 3 dots.
So the trust factor seems to have returned much more, and when there was an element of concern in August of 2021.
That has come, but when we put the 3 dots, there is also, using that phrase, "In God we trust, in Modi we trust, but." And if you see when we did the previous thing on the states, the thing that is coming through is on the economy and jobs. So in Modi we trust, but jobs we want.
We'll come to that. Rahul will tell us in terms of biggest achievement, biggest failure in a moment. But Supriya, Srinath, you want to respond to that? Because that's what it's coming. Chemistry was, the chemistry is where the Congress or the opposition has been unable to benefit from the clear decline we saw in August, even in the Prime Minister's popularity. He's back up and you're not able to exploit the situation.
I have a very simple question to ask. When the BJP loses all the 5 states that it is going into election, 4 of which it is defending, what will it mean for Mr. Modi? Will this survey then stand true? Will respondents, quote unquote, of this survey stand true? Or will voters who will vote out the BJP stand true? Trust me on this. It's going to be a whitewash. Nil bata sannata hone wala hai Bharatiya Janata Party.
So you're making a distinction between state and general election. You're making a distinction between state and general elections.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you why. Because in all these states, what are they fighting the election on? They're fighting it in the face of Mr. Modi. He is the mascot even in Uttar Pradesh. Mr. Yogi has been sidelined. He's been sent to Gorakhpur. Who is this election being fought for? The Prime Minister came 11 times in a month and a half to UP. This is going to be a mandate on him. The floating dead bodies, or for that matter, the nurses who are beaten up, or for that matter, the people who are unemployed. This is a mandate on him. रोजगार मांग रहा है देश, कौन देगा रोजगार? 8 साल से सरकार में टेलीप्रॉम्प्टर फेल होता है, भाषण जी भी ढेर हो जाते हैं, रोजगार की बात कौन करेगा? ये बताइए मुझे। दावोस में आप बड़ी-बड़ी बात करिएगा, अरे अपने लोगों से तो बात करिए।
Let's look at those issues, Rahul. Rahul, again, do a deep dive into those numbers. When you look at it, the Prime Minister's popularity is slightly up, considerably up compared to the decline, the hit it took in August of 2021. You want to explain what are seen as achievements, failures?
Now, it's very interesting because in the imagination or perception of people in the opposition or those who don't like Prime Minister Modi and the current BJP government, the handling of COVID has been one of the biggest failures of this government. But when you ask respondents in the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll, their perception of the government's handling of COVID is very different. So let's take on our screen right now data for what people believe is the biggest achievement of the current Modi Sarkar. 22% of the respondents say the handling of COVID is the #1 achievement. If you look back in August, this was at 12. In January 2021, it was at 15. In August, it was at 7. So you've actually seen people's perception of the government's handling of COVID go up. So what was earlier seen as a big downer, was seen as something which would be a knockout punch for the government, is today perceived as its greatest achievement, as its big achievement. That people feel that with Modi at the helm, we've actually come out stronger or better from COVID than we would have had another government being in place. And this is one of the biggest headlines emerging from this India Today See Voter Mood of the Nation opinion poll, that it is actually the handling of the COVID pandemic, which according to this very credible tracker is seen as the #1 achievement. Now, if you're watching on TV at this moment or on social media, you may have a different take, but this is the big national picture that emerges from this poll. At number 2 is the building of the Ram temple in Ayodhya and the Kashi Vishwanath corridor. Now there, if you compare with August 2021, where 29% thought that the building of the Ram temple was the biggest achievement, it's actually come down to 15.7%. So in the way that I see it, people seem to have factored in कि हाँ ये तो हो गया, Ram temple तो अब बन रहा है, so it's not that big a deal, because in January 2021, 27% said it's the biggest achievement. From there, it's actually come down to 15.7%. So Ram temple hazam ho gaya in the sense that people imagine that, okay, now we've got a Ram temple going, and that's a good thing, we appreciate it, but it's not necessarily the biggest achievement. It's now being taken as a given. Then the revocation of Article 370 in Kashmir. 12% say it's the #1 achievement. Here again, you go back into past data, it shows you how in August 2021, 22% said this was the #1 achievement, and in January 2021, 20% said it's the #1 achievement. So since then, it's actually come down. There again, yeah, so these are people who are impatient for change. They applauded the revocation of Article 370, but now it's a done deal, so this can't be a big achievement. Dil mange more, we want more. This is a population that's constantly putting its government to the test and saying, okay, move ahead. You've done Ram temple, you've done the revocation of 370, great, what next? If I go down below on that list, you've got things like the Swachh Bharat Mission, Ujjwala Yojana, the fact that this is perceived as a corruption-free government, and the crackdown on black money through demonetization also show up. Now remember, government critics think of demonetization as one of its biggest failures. It's actually seen as one of the top few strengths and achievements of the Modi government in the eyes of the Indian voter, and that matters, which also explains some of these election results. So those are the big achievements. Let's now switch to the biggest failures of the Modi Sarkar, and this is where the BJP top brass have things to worry about, because at this moment, price rise and inflation is coming out as the number one worry of voters. It was 29% in our last tracker in August, 13% before that, 11% in August 2020. So if you look at the trackers we did last year, the number of people who are now worried about inflation and price rise is twice of the number of people who are worried about inflation and price rise in the previous trackers from last year. So that's one key takeaway. Unemployment remains the #2 concern area or the failure of the Modi Sarkar, where 13.6% of the respondents say unemployment is their #1 fear and the biggest failure of the Modi Sarkar. It's been worse. In January 2021, it was at 29%, then it came down to 23%. So if you were a BJP supporter, you could look at this data and say, yes, unemployment is always problematic, but it's actually getting better. At least the perception is getting better. From 29, it's now down to 13.6, but it's the #2 worry even at this moment. Then there is the farmers' protest and distress. And here, what's interesting is that farmer protest seems to have struck a chord where the number of people nationally who think that farmer distress and protest is the #1 issue is up at 10.3. In previous polls, in August 2020, for example, it was only 6%. From there, it kept inching up. And even though the agitation is now over and the farmers are back home and the farm laws have been scrapped, this is the #3 worry as far as people across the country are concerned. And this would be a good opportunity to go across to Rahul Verma and understand from him how farmers' protest seems to be registering high up. It wasn't this big a number earlier, and it's not just in Punjab, but even nationally, people perceiving farmers' protest is one of the key problems, as also inflation, which comes in at #1.
In fact, if I may add to what Rahul is saying before Rahul Verma, if you put all those three together, 25% inflation, 14% unemployment, 10%, it comes to roughly half are worried about some element linked to economic distress. Is that the one Achilles heel, clear Achilles heel of this government at the moment?
Thank you, Rahul and Rajdeep. In my opinion, survey after survey, we have been seeing that this pocketbook consideration, inflation, unemployment, economy, is all basically ranking up very, very high in surveys. This is happening since, I think, 2017, 2018. And every year, the number seems to going up. The government, both at the national and state level, should be concerned because, economy can anytime spill into anger and you could be voted out. But for last 3 years, at least whatever the results have been either at the national level or in the states, we are not seeing governments being voted out. In fact, most of the governments are returning. And so I'm not sure basically what might be happening in Indian politics, and this is what requires deep thinking. I don't have easy answers to it. That something which is happening in electoral arena is very, very different from what is happening in social arena and what is happening in the economic arena. So you are seeing large-scale protests, but those protests are not basically putting electoral cost on the government. So these two things are very, very different. Second, Rajdeep, and I'll finish here. I think, and this is perhaps politically not correct to say, but at least in surveys, voters are being very short-sighted or myopic, in a sense that short-term considerations are basically driving their responses. So if you look at your own mood of the nation trends, basically just after second COVID wave, everything was bad. Or just after, 2019 Pulwama, Balakot and Prime Minister coming back, everything goes up. So I think basically short-term factors are guiding voters' response. But in politics, the electoral outcomes are determined by political structures. And those two things are going very separate.
Very interesting, because that brings me to the next point, because there is this question, is there an alternative? At the end of the day, politics is also about choosing alternatives. We asked, who is best suited to succeed Modi as a BJP leader of the future? In the MOTN of January 2021, 30% said Amit Shah. It came down in August 21 poll, and he remains at 24%. Yogi Adityanath has gone up marginally from 21% in January of 2021 to 23%. He is, of course, in the public eye at the moment because of the UP elections. But we also asked, who's best suited to lead the opposition? And here there's an interesting finding. In the MOTN January 2022, Mamata Banerjee is at 17%, Arvind Kejriwal is 16%, Rahul Gandhi is 11%. And I've been looking at back data. This is the first time that Mamata Banerjee is the #1 candidate seen best suited to lead opposition. Again, this may be an effect of a big victory just 6 months ago, the fact she's in the eye, and Arvind Kejriwal also picking up. Rahul Gandhi to that extent losing out. Normally Rahul Gandhi has been seen as the best suited to lead opposition because of the strong presence of the Congress in the opposition. Quick reactions to that. Shashi Panja, you first. Here is some good news. The question is whether Mamata Banerjee really can bring all the opposition together, or is she an Ekla Chalore leader?
No. She has been one of the formidable challengers to the BJP, undoubtedly. I think you all agree on that. And secondly, she's also been one of those leaders who has vouched for unity of the opposition. Absolutely, she has said, in fact, even now, in Uttar Pradesh, we are not politically contesting, and that's not the priority. We are there to support Samajwadi Party and Akhilesh Yadav as and when he needs us. So it is mainly that we need to stitch an alliance, just like we did in Goa.
No, you want to stitch an alliance or take over the Congress? You want to stitch an alliance or break the Congress and emerge as the real Congress?
Absolutely not. We have made an offer to the Congress, and it is there in the public domain. Our national vice president has put it out in the public domain.
No, do you want to nationally become the real Congress?
Mr. Chidambaram? No.
Forget about Goa. These numbers are national. Do you want Mamata Banerjee to lead the opposition?
Why not? If the nation wants, why not? It's
Okay.
not that Mamata Banerjee is vying for it. The nation may want it.
Okay, we just have enough time for final comments. Supriya Shine, do you want to give a final comment? Look, as I come back to it, from August 2021, where the BJP and the Prime Minister appeared at a low, they seem to have slowly climbed back. Is part of the problem the Congress's inability to set a clear narrative of change?
No, absolutely not. I totally refute this. And before I take your direct question, I'll take 10 seconds to put on record some things that were said before me by previous speakers. Let us not shy away from demonetization. It's not the critics who are criticizing it. Demonetization halved our economic growth from 8.2 to 4.1% pre-pandemic. Point number one. Point number two, people said governments are being voted back. No, sir, governments are not being voted back. Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Goa, Karnataka, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur. There are examples. Yes, we see how the BJP misuses its agencies and the money power and topples democratically elected government. So that, again, a second point. 700 farmers dead. A constitutional authority has said that the Prime Minister said they have not died for me. You think people are not going to vote on this? You think people are not taking cognizance of the fact that Ajay Mishra Teni continues to be India's Home Minister and his son is the main accused in the Lakhimpur massacre? What are we talking about?
So you're basically saying our poll does not reflect the mood on the ground.
Vote in these elections.
Okay, you're saying this poll doesn't reflect the mood on the ground.
It certainly does not, at least the ground that I'm covering.
Okay.
At least the ground that I'm traveling.
Let me give Shehzad Poonawalla 30 seconds as well. Shehzad Poonawalla, what's your biggest takeaway from this mood of the nation?
Rajdeep, first of all, if this is not the mood of the nation and Supriya ji is so sure about what is going to happen in the 5 states, Priyanka Vadra should contest from Gorakhpur. I offer her the opportunity that she should come and test the ground on Gorakhpur and she should declare that so that we can then conclusively say that mood of the nation poll is rubbish and what Supriya ji is saying is correct. Now, as far as this poll is concerned, the last part shows one thing, that Congress is fighting for existence, Trinamool cannibalizing Congress is fighting for sustenance and BJP is fighting for excellence. BJP's mission is excellence and therefore you see the COVID handling. 160 crore vaccines doses have been delivered. Almost 19 times the German population. Rajdeep, I did not interrupt anybody. She has cannibalized my time, although she can't cannibalize anybody else politically. She has cannibalized my time and you're allowing her to interrupt me to not allow me to have a say.
30 seconds.
This is not the way.
No. Shehzad, yes, quickly.
Yeah, this is not the way, Rajdeep. You're a fair anchor. This should not be allowed. Thank you.
30 seconds. Finish your 30 seconds. Shehzad.
Yeah. So Rajdeep, Rajdeep, Tina has now been replaced by Tima. Tima means that trust in Modi always and trust in Modi always कि आपदा को भी हमने अवसर बनाया, लोगों की जिंदगियों को निहारा, कोरोना काल में हमने 160 करोड़ वैक्सीन डोजेस दिए, 19 बार जर्मनी को वैक्सीनेट करने जैसा कार्य था.
Your time is up, but I can tell you with all your one-liners and acronyms, the Prime Minister will be very happy with you. He's a master of acronyms. But final word to the editor of the magazine. Your cover is "In Modi We Trust." Am I correct?
Yes.
Do you believe, though, it's trust, but with a qualification?
Yes, and plenty of them.
Plenty of qualifications, starting primarily with the economy.
Yes, I think that's where he really needs to focus on. I don't agree with what Rahul Verma said, that in the past, these listings of inflation or prices going up and jobs really didn't make a difference to voting. I think we've had a pandemic, and if you see some of the devastation that has been caused in terms of drop of incomes and everything else, this government the NDA government can ignore these only at its own peril. So his big task in the remaining tenure of his is he must ensure that not only does the economy recover, but India becomes prosperous. The other task, I would think, and that comes out through the other findings that is that there is need for him to be the great unifier. There is a lot of distrust across the country, a polarization that is there. He needs to be the unifying face, and that should be his other mission.
Well, that's going to be a big challenge. The silence of the government at times over hate speech, for example, is something they've got to consider. Clearly the economy, though, remains the biggest concern for the government. But perhaps Mr. Modi is still seen, as the cover says, as the leader whom the most number of Indians continue to trust when it comes to electoral preferences. And maybe there's a disjunction at times between your political preferences and social and economic issues. On that note, to all my panelists on the Mood of the Nation, thank you all very much for joining us. You can, of course, read much more in the latest issue of India Today. The Mood of the Nation 2022. At the end of the day, Janta Janardhan. They will decide who, in a way, comes to power. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Bye for now.